Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Delgado, the Literary Director of the University of Arizona Poetry Center, and I want to welcome everyone to another episode of the Institute for Inquiry and Poetics, featuring ambassadors from our Art for Justice initiative. The Institute for Inquiry and Poetics, founded at the University of Arizona Poetry Center, is a thought center designed to create space and time for poets to respond to pressing questions that reside at the intersection of social concern and poetry. Encouraging interdisciplinary modalities and investigative research, the Institute will ask poets a series of questions and digitally archive their responses on poetry.arizona.edu, in addition to YouTube and the center's archive Evoca. Tonight, I'm very excited to host a reading with our very close partner, Reginald Dwayne Betts. Dwayne Betts is a poet and the director of the Million Book Project, an initiative out of the Yale Law School's Justice Collaboratory to radically transform the access to literature in prisons. The author of a memoir and 3 collections of poetry, his latest collection of poetry, Felon, explores the post-incarceration experience and lingering consequences of a criminal record. In 2019, Betts won the National Magazine Award in the Essays and Criticism category for his New York Times Magazine essay that chronicles his journey from prison to becoming a licensed attorney. Dwayne has become an integral part of Art for Justice, which is a 3-year project that commissions new work from leading writers in conversation with the crisis of mass incarceration in the United States, all with the goal of creating new awareness and empathy through presentation and publication. Thank you, Dwayne, for being here with us tonight.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure, always.
Thank you so much. I also want to give a special thanks to TJ Hill, our producer, the Ford Foundation, and the entire team at the University of Arizona Poetry Center, Kima Jones, who have helped make this reading possible. In our program tonight, we also have another special guest who will be introducing Dwayne, and that is both a colleague of mine and local Tucsonian, Joe Watson. Joe Watson is a formerly incarcerated writer and media professional who works as a communications director for the Pima County Attorney's Office in Tucson, Arizona. Since his release from prison in 2017, after serving more than 10 years inside, Joe has advocated for sentencing reform and greater access to reentry resources, organized around prosecutorial reform, and leads a free monthly workshop at the Poetry Center called Free Time. He enlists community members to help mentor incarcerated writers, and it's a very successful workshop. So thank you, Joe, for being here with us tonight, and thank you for introducing Dwayne.
Thank you so very much. Dwayne, wonderful to see you. Reginald Dwayne Betts barely knows me, but he has absolutely changed my life. He didn't know me at all when I walked into a Tucson restaurant 3.5 years ago. 2 months removed from doing a 10-year stretch in the Arizona Department of Corrections. And I shook his hand, sat down with him and a bunch of other folks with MFAs and other letters after their names, and just started talking about my time in prison, about race and politics in prison, about an essay I wrote from inside, about tattoos. And an hour later, he told me to apply for a MacDowell Fellowship. MacDowell, this place in New Hampshire where Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and James Baldwin had gone to write, a place I'd never even heard of. So I applied and they took me. And Dwayne will not take credit, but without his advocacy, either direct or indirect, they wouldn't have taken me. And when the Art for Justice Fund gave the Poetry Center $500,000 to use poetry to help change the system, Dwayne, by this time several months removed from that one dinner, one night in Tucson, spoke for me again. 3 years later, we have a monthly workshop called Free Time that Diana referenced. It brings together local writers and artists and pairs them with incarcerated writers all over the country, building a bridge through the US mail from the inside to the outside, creating space for incarcerated writers to have their voices heard. And who leads that workshop? Me, because Dwayne advocated for me. A couple hundred incarcerated writers every month, giving them hope in a place so desperate for it, because Dwayne advocated for it. He advocated for them. He advocated for me. I'm just another dude who did time. Just another formerly incarcerated person who wanted his voice heard. another fan, to be honest, who Dwayne barely knows. So on behalf of all the incarcerated writers, our workshop reaches every month. On behalf of every other incarcerated person who barely knows you, Dwayne, but who no doubt you have advocated for. How many are there? Who knows how many? I just want to say thank you for changing our lives, for changing my life. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please welcome Dwayne Betts.
Yeah, that's real. It's so funny because I forgot all about most of that stuff. I mean, like I remember the stuff that mattered. Like I remember meeting you, and I remember seeing you actually in line at that like taco spot. And you had a mean tattoo, and I've been thinking about getting a tattoo. And I was like, I should say something to do. And I was like, I'm not about to start talking to strange white men in taco joints about tattoos. And so it blew my mind when, like, literally, this was right before lunch because we met first at lunch, and it blew my mind when just
Yeah.
like a short time later you walked in and sat down. I was like, man, I think I just saw. Let me see your arm. And it's cool
Here
because
it is. It was that
yeah.
tattoo right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and since then I got a huge joint on my back that took like 26 hours to get, and I got one on my arm that took another 9 hours. And so yeah, I mean I think it's a pleasure. But one of the things you highlighted is that the commitment to this work and the commitment to each other has very little to do, I think, with being thanked. We make the decisions that we make in a moment to encourage each other. And it was easy. I mean, you were a good writer before you went in, you were a good writer while you went in, and they were supposed to accept you. But the trick of it all is a lot of times we don't know that McDowell exists. And so I'm glad that you applied. I'm glad that you got in. And I had very little to do with it for real, besides pushing you to apply. So that's great. What I'm gonna do now, I'm just gonna read a little bit to y'all. It's funny. I mean, I be thinking, right? Like, what do you think about when you hear the word prison? I mean, some folks, they say violence, they say bars, they say time. If they know somebody that's inside, they think about how long it takes them to get from where they are to hugging their loved ones. For me, when I think about the word prison, I think about books. You got to understand that there is no bookshelf in prison, no chance to grab something and hold it, take it back to your cell. Nah, and to really get me, to really understand what it means to live distant from books, I got to take you back to the summer of 1998. I should have been basking in whatever celebrations come with graduating from high school. I should have been thinking about my prom. But the summer of 1998, my world was like this. I was in solitary confinement. I was 17 years old and I was learning how to bid, and it was wild because men were yelling from 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. After a while, I got acclimated to the noise, and every once in a while, you would hear somebody shout, "Hey, yo, send me a book." We were in cells that were parallel with just concrete, damn near ocean of concrete separating us. And when you heard the call, you would hear soon after, swish. And if it was a magazine, it sounded damn near like birds' wings flapping. After a while, I got my courage up, right? Because I hear folks call for a book and they say, where you at? And then the voices say, cell 13. And I realized that books were contraband, and these guys had created an underground highway where books were the currency given for free. So one night I shout, "Hey, yo, send me a book." And the call comes back, "What cell?" And I say 19. And I look out of my cell door and I see an arm on the ground. I know that man must have been laying on the floor with his ear pressed to the concrete as if listening for something. And he's so far away that I can't see his face. And I can't imagine the book making it from his cell to mine, but it drops into my hand like some kind of manna. The Black Poets by Dudley Randall. You got to get this. I'm 17 years old. And I'm thinking, who would imagine me in prison wanting to read poems? I was desperate, though. I had nothing else. It was the summertime. It was hot. I needed to read something. And so I'm reading and I'm discovering Langston Hughes, Sterling Brown, Lucille Clifton, Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni. It got to the point where I'm just stopping on names. Robert Hayden, that seems cool. I get to this cat named Etheridge Knight, and I stop on his poem not because I know who he is. I stop on his poems because then and now I knew nobody's mama who named him Etheridge. I'm reading Knight, and he talking about 46 pictures taped to his cell wall. I had like 7 taped to mine, and I'm like, he got something there. He talking about 16-year-olds in prison. When I first came inside at 16, I knew somebody would ask for the book and I would have to give it up. So I started writing the poems down in longhand. Had to take it with me. Later, I learned that Knight had actually served time in prison, and it hit me. That's why beneath the poems, I could hear him singing. Name a song that tells a man what to expect after prison. Explains Occam's razor. You're still a suspect after prison. And the wild thing is, 20 years later, I have wrote my own thing, Felon. It's crazy. Because if you skip to the back and you read my acknowledgments, you'll see that I dedicated this book to men named Christopher Tunstall, Terrell Kelly, Roger Fenstress, Anthony Wynn, Kevin Williams. I did times with these dudes. Some of their names I only remember in dreams. The writing reminded me of them, and I imagined that I was writing this for them. Then I realized the book is hardback. And in most prisons in this country, this thing that I dedicated to them cannot be slid under their cell doors. I had to figure it out, right? So I got with some folks that had a little bit of money, and I said, we need to make a prison edition. I did 8.5 years in prison, and I came home and suggested that I should make a prison edition of a book. A friend looked at me and said, nah, we don't make prison editions. We make freedom editions. So we got together, right? And I was like, you right, we make freedom editions. We made this here, and you flip the pages, it actually sounds like birds' wings flapping. An edition of the book that's just for men, women, and children on the inside. Me thinking that if I slide this thing under your door, you read some of the poems and you'll hear me singing beneath them. Name a song that tells a man what to expect after prison. Is this Occam's razor? Am I still a felon after prison? Blood history. The things that abandon you get remembered different. The things that abandon you get remembered different. The things that abandon you get remembered different. The things that I was in a cell with Juvie at Sussex One State Prison, and we was at one of these spots that ain't have hot water or a microwave. So if you wanted to make yourself something to eat, you would take some toilet paper and you would roll it around your hand like this. You cup it at the bottom. And if you could see through it, you got you a winner. We called it a stove. You would sit it on your tin can toilet. You would light the bottom and the flame would shoot out through the center. All flame, no smoke. You would take your soda can, tie it to a string, and hold it over the fire. By the time the fire went out, your can was bubbling. And you could make you coffee and you could make you soups. One time, I'm in a cell with Juvie and I got the flame going. But I ain't holding a soda can. I'm holding a sheaf of my father's letters, 5 years worth. And Juvie watches me hold it over the fire, and the letters turn to ash. Blood history. The things that abandon you get remembered different. As precise as the English language can be, with words like penultimate and perseverate. There is not an exact combination of sounds that describe only that leaving. Once, drinking and smoking with buddies, a friend asked if I longed for a father. Had he said wanted, I would have dismissed him in a way that youngins dismiss it all. A shrug, sarcasm, a sharp jab to the stomach, laughter. But he said longing, and in a different place, I might have wept. Said once my father lived with us, and then he didn't. And it fucked me up so bad that I didn't think about his leaving until I held my first son in my arms, and only now speak on it. A man who drank whiskey and wild Irish rose like water once told me and some friends that there's no word for father where he comes from. Not like we know it. There, the word father is the same as the word for listen. The blunts we passed around let us abandon our tongues. Not that much, though. But what if the old head knew something? And if you have no father, you can't hear straight. Years later, my pop says to me, son, why you ain't give your boy our name? As if he ain't know. Some things turn your life into a prayer. The gods will certainly answer. March 4th, 2005. I walked out of prison for what I knew would be the last time. I mean, I came home and I would be telling my folks, yo, I came home on March 4th. I'm in my mother's kitchen. There's a crowd of people around me. And I'm like, I came home on March 4th. March 4th, I came home. And they looking at me strange because you got to understand, I only been home for a day. So clearly they knew that I had came home on March 4th. And my uncle, he like, you mean yesterday? And I mean, no, I came home on March 4th. Shit is wild. I went to prison as a teenager with other teenagers who rechristened themselves with new names. Righteous, mathematics, wisdom. My man Chris became Juvie. Roger was Fets. Anthony was Abso. Terrell was Born Star. And me, I'm around all of these dudes rechristening themselves for what they might be or become. And I said, call me Shaheed. I looked it up and it meant the witness. What kind of fool am I? Naming myself something like that and believing that I could turn the first corner without confessing where I've been. Last four lines of a love song after prison. Prison killed you, my love. Killed you so dead that you're not here now. You're never here, you're always. And brown liquor owns you. Those cells own you. And there's no room for me unless I call the police, the state, upon my pistol to set you free. Dear Warden, my time been served. Let me go. You promised that some of this I wouldn't recollect after prison. And my lover don't believe in my sadness. She says whiskey and not time is what left me wrecked after prison. And maybe she's right. My liver awash in all but the dregs of a charred oak cask, soaked in barley's amber, shadowed as blood, dim as a cell in a hole. Survived brackish prison water only to become collateral. The things that haunt me still drown now, friends say. In nearly 50 pounds of brick-hued rock gut, spiritus frumenti. A gallon of whiskey weighs 8 pounds, and I am riven. And all this becomes a man confessing. My father, he took 2 buses, a train, and another bus. And then he walked a quarter mile to get to the law firm of attorney McClement. He walks into the building and he stops at the reception desk, and there's a young woman there staring at him. And he says, "My name is Reginald Dwayne Betts, and I'm here to see attorney McClement." And the woman stares at him. And he says, "Reginald Dwayne Betts." And she says, "I heard you." And she's like tapping on the desk, and she's like, mister, I think I'm dating your son." And he says, "Nah, my boy been locked up since he was 16 years old, and he's still in prison." And she say, "Nah, I met him at this bookstore around the way, and a few months later, we ran into each other. You know, he in college. We ran into each other at the community college, and I think I'm dating your son." My phone rings, and I see it's her, so I smile, and I answer, and my dad say, "Son, you see, no letters distinguish my father's name from my own. No signal for the mailman, the postman, my employer. The man before them is me, and not what follows after grief. We are no goldfinch, instead a kind of crow, a murder of us looming. Search out history and find felonies and divorce proceedings. The online account of our background, a song of tragedy and regret. A dozen men with portions of our name, variations and fragments, evidence of being called before a judge for everything from domestic violence to traffic tickets to something called jury trial prayer. And all I did to land me in those prison cells. And there is no way to distinguish us without a birth date, a social security number, or witnessing the tat along the inside of my right arm. Name a song that tells a man what to expect after prison. Is this Occam's razor? Am I still a suspect, a felon after prison? Thank you.
Dwayne, you're a genius. Completely,
Oh, thank you.
seriously, really blown away. I've done a little bit of theater. I say a little bit because it's tricky, but this performance and the way that you kind of tapped into it in a way that just left me just completely engaged from the moment you began speaking, and that's no lie. So I want to ask you a few questions about it, but I also want to hear from Joe because I'm sure Joe has some thoughts about what he heard too.
Yeah, I mean, the way it's always real, you know,
Whew.
part of me is like, I don't want to go back to that place, but every time you take me there, I see something about my 10 plus years that I didn't before. And something else that I'm just appreciative uh, for. And, you know, there were definitely some parts that spoke to me uh, uh, more than others, but it just, you have a way of um, of shining a light on things that folks who've done time didn't even know that they were going through. And so I'm so thankful for you.
Yeah, nah, man, I appreciate that. You know, this joint is interesting because yeah, I saw it in 20 minutes of a 75-minute show, and you know, one of the challenges is always you know, when you reveal a little bit, you're like, yo, how does it play? And then also, and some of the other pieces that you didn't see, like this is kind of like my virtual set. You know, you got the redaction print, but this is a handmade paper that I made for my homies. They sent me that clothes, you know, and you know this, Joe. You know, like
Hmm.
you get the sweatpants, man, and at first they start out as like what you wear to look fly, then you sleeping in them, and then you working out in them, and they got holes in the kind of wear and tear that nothing on the outside ever sees it, you know. And I had my boys send me this, and a lot of the cats was like they were still in prison, and I made paper out of it, handmade paper with intention of like wanting them to exist on the outside. And yeah, and then if you know the rest of the show, you'll see I tell a story about representing a few guys and like dudes I did time with and getting them out on parole. But the thing is, you know, I think I've returned to it in the same way. And working on this piece has been sort of my bid to say, how do you make the poetry matter? But then also like how do you make it communicate with people on both sides of the fence? Because you know, sometimes you send a book of poems in and they like, I don't know what the poems mean. You know, like I don't know how to read poetry. And so the idea is this is my bid to say, I bet I can make you dig some poetry and I bet I can make you like think about how it reflects experience. So I appreciate y'all. Yeah, I appreciate all the folks watching this for a minute. And I hope at some point you'll be able to see the whole show because yeah, I like to think it's a journey. I mean, 75 minutes on your feet is like, you know, it's serious.
Does it have a title, and when, like, what are your, when do we see it? Like, when, I don't know. I'm really excited about this for a number of reasons, but I think I want to know the title. When can we see it? And I also want to know how you landed on that. I think that that's something really interesting when you said it's necessary at this point. Like, how do you get more people engaged, right? And you're doing more of a direct address. But like, how did you even land there? Because some people are like, maybe if I make a crown of, what if I do this, on the page? But
Yeah,
you're breaking the wall, and I just, yeah, tell
yeah,
me about it.
yeah. No, so it's called Felon, an American Washi Tail, and it's called Washi Tail because washi is sort of the handmade Japanese paper. And I got a collaboration with a number of people, from Titus Kaffar to Ruth Lingnan
Uh-huh.
to Kyoko Ibe, and Elise Thorne is my director, and so yeah, that's the full title is Felon and American Washi Tail. But this idea that in Japanese culture, one element of Japanese culture is this notion that like handmade paper captures the essence of people, and it's almost a, you know, it seems hokey to say it, but it's almost like a spiritual practice, and what it means to recycle. You know, turning their clothes into paper is a way to allow the paper to embody some of who they are in the world, and it has a physicality to it. And so it's in development now. I'm gonna do a prison tour, you know, 20 states, 20 cities, 60 prisons. And the idea really is to use that. Oh yeah, definitely Arizona, you know, and the
Yeah.
idea is to use that um as a way to expose folks to the work that I'm doing, but I think also as a way to just be like, you know, sometimes you just need a chance to say that this thing matters in the world.
Hmm.
And so this is part of that. This is part of saying this thing really matters in the world. So
Mhm.
um so as soon as COVID is over, I mean, right now I've been doing it. You know, I've been doing it on Zoom. I've been doing it doing it for different audiences, different colleges, sweeps of it, like not the whole thing. And soon as we figure out COVID, I mean, right now I'm getting it in my head and in my heart so that I could get on the stage in August and start working on it on the stage. You know, it's both the physicality of the paper, but it's also the physicality of one memorizing things, you know,
Yeah.
and then also the physicality of how do you move in space, and how do you become a conduit for everything is new, man. You know, like you don't even know how you're gonna feel when you start, and then you get into it, and something hooks you, and it's that interplay with like words, emotions, and ideas that I think comes from being responsive to the audience. So so yeah, man, I'm looking, I mean, that's when, if COVID, if COVID wouldn't have happened, I mean, that's what I would be performing, next week or next month when I came to Arizona. But yeah.
I'm speechless. I know that you had said that you were going to be doing this, and I was like, okay, cool. Um, but I was like, yeah, whatever, let's do it. But you started reading, and I just was quiet, and I was there with you, and I have family, lots of family that have been, incarcerated for a long time, brought me back to those relationships and the stories that they came out and sometimes told. It just brought me back to that place. And it also was just so visceral because, like you said, a lot of performance and acting is in the body. So there's a lot of somatic, you're just going into a different plane of the creative process. And I'm just in awe and thankful that you're able to kind of, I'm in awe of just so many things. Sorry, I can't even talk right now because I was so blown away by that. But I want to know a little bit more if you could share about how the project even began. I think we've been working on this. I came in a little bit later at the Poetry Center, and you had this vision that you brought to Tyler Meyer, who's the executive director, and later Kima Jones became involved. And I just want to know if you could share a little bit about how that vision, you're a visionary, you had this vision, this idea, and you made it happen. And I don't know
Yeah,
if you could share a bit about that.
yeah. Well, I guess it's two things. Really, I mean, like Tyler was the one who conceptualized the whole thing.
Oh,
And,
okay.
and yeah, this was all on Tyler. And well, and I mean, if we talking about the partnership between me and the Arizona Poetry
Yeah, the Art
Center,
for Justice. Yeah.
yeah, that was like Tyler he was already tapped in, and he was already applying. And my thing was just like, and so at first though, the one thing I did add was he had this list of writers, and I was like, wait, nah, you got to be funky with it. And you want to get a mixture of some folks that might have direct experience inside, and it's not many of us anyway. But you think of some of the folks involved, like Tosin, who like he's taught in prisons and he's done a lot of work in the community. Um, but then you think of like Randall Horton, who's been locked up, and you
Yeah.
think about. But then what happens with like prison and incarceration is, even when if it's in our work, we begin to characterize people in certain ways that sometimes um, doesn't expose the full breadth of what we care about. So you take somebody like Natalie Diaz, who
Hmm.
who's thought about this a lot, and who's had family members that have been incarcerated, and it's in the work, but people tend to stereotype folks. Like I'm publishing one of her pieces in the New York Times Magazine, and it's a
Yeah.
love poem. And it's not to say that she doesn't write political verse too, but it's to say that we need love poems, and
Yeah.
and that we need to try to recognize the capaciousness of folks. And so I was like, what we need to do is pull the usual suspects in, and people like me, right? People like John Maria, people like
Hmm.
Randall. But then how do you pull other folks in though, who you don't even know had this experience, but I know because we friends, and I know that like their work hasn't touched it. It's
Yeah.
like Nicole Silly, or like Nikki Finney, who was like, I don't know what she has to do with prison, but she is a contemporary American poet who should be talking about prison. So then how do you bring her in? And it's been a dope project, but I think it's also, it's also like a struggle. There's 2.4 so million people in prison. You still have people who can't get jobs because they've been incarcerated. You still have folks who get denied like all kinds of opportunities, from being a barber to, you know, being a nurse to going to law school to going to medical school. I mean, people still have many like career options blocked. People still get looked at as scants in their communities. And so asking contemporary writers about this, I was serious about it in the sense that if we literary citizens and this truly matters, then our voices should be on this issue. And this became a project and an opportunity to put our voices on the issue. And a lot of writers, they already do it. You know, writers who were involved with this project and writers who couldn't be involved with this project. But this project, I do think, got some work out of people who just wouldn't have written the poems they wrote. And
Hmm.
and to say, look, and we're going to help facilitate you going inside of a prison.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it was Joe, no, prison is a lot of things, man. Is sexist, hyper masculine, it's homophobic, it's fucking frightening. And if you want prison to not be some of those things, you got to show up. And sometimes it's not enough hope in prison. And so asking people to show up is asking for prisoners to be more than what they are. And once we demand that they be more than what they are, then I think we're demanding that they be conduits for freedom as opposed to conduits for more suffering. And I mean both the freedom in a literal sense,
Hmm.
but also freedom in a more, uh, effervescence.
Hmm. 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 Yeah, I think thank you for sharing a bit about how that kind of came to be. And Tyler Meyer of ED of the Poetry Center, we both we all work very closely with, is really great at sort of conceiving these really big ideas. So thank you for sharing that he had some of those things there. I think that we are now moving into a space where we're hoping to create an anthology of the work. We're hoping to create something that will be used by educators, abolitionists, poets, people who are already on the ground. We're hoping to kind of spread just a wide reach. We're hoping, right? And I just want to sort of touch base with you about, like, what are your hopes for the anthology? We've talked about it, but
Yeah,
just
yeah,
just a signal, like, to people of what we're
yeah.
hoping.
I mean, the truth is that the reason why anthologies are precious is because, like, I wasn't going to have Robert Hayden, Lucille Clifton, Sonia Sanchez, Langston Hughes, Amiri Baraka. I wasn't gonna have all of those folks in the cell with me at the same time. I couldn't afford 5, 6, 7, 10 poetry books. And so the anthology becomes a vehicle and a mechanism to get more voices in one space at one time. It becomes a way to introduce folks to names they should know. And that's how I became a poet. It wasn't just that I had a poetry book. It was that I had a poetry book that introduced me to a wide range of writers. I mean, some of the writers, I could just flip through, and literally I could flip through it and be like, oh man, Audubon Tomps. Yeah, that's Langston Hughes, homie. He
Mm,
actually wrote a anthology. I think he co-edited it with Hughes. Oh, County Cullen. Okay, I remember this. I remember. Yet do I marvel to this. Yet do I marvel this. What did he say? This brilliant thing to make a to. Let me see. He says, yet do I marvel at this curious thing to make a black poet and bid him sing. And those lines have been in my head for a long time. Sterling Brown, I could just flip through this and know Frank Marshall. Nobody ever talks about Frank Marshall, black poet, born in 1905. Writing at the
mm,
turn of the 20th century. People don't talk about him. So it's like I met all of these folks, Ray Durham, voices that have in a way been forgotten, Gwendolyn Brooks. And those voices like turned me into a poet. And a lot of these folks, you wouldn't even, they're not going to be taught in classrooms. You're not going to run into them. You're not going to find their books in the bookstores. But all of these people gave me a sense of how I might become a poet and a writer. And so that's the power of an anthology. And that's what we're producing. June Jordan, Larry Neal. I mean, this is a veritable like who's who on the black literary landscape that you should just know about. And that's what we're doing. You should not be a contemporary writer in prison or out and not know who Nikki Finney is.
yeah.
Not know who Patricia Smith is, not know who John Murillo is. And I think the anthology is a powerful way to assert that. And I'm really thankful for the folks that have been involved. It's not
Yeah.
it's not it's a slice of contemporary American poetry, but it's a beautiful slice,
Mhm.
it's like a wonderful slice.
That's a great way of putting it. I think that what keeps the refrain in your work and just sort of talking is like how important a book, how important books are to you. All books, right? And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Million Book Project
Yeah.
and what that is, because that's another amazing sort of thing that you're leading and you're doing now.
Yeah. So the Million Book Project is basically it's arguing, right? Like, what does it mean if we put a freedom library in prisons all across this country in every state? And the freedom library is both a physical structure, like a set of shelving units that also have places for you to sit down, but to transform the space in prison so that it's not just, and it's in the housing unit so that you could go and you could grab these books while you're in the housing unit. And it's based on the arc, based on thinking about Martin Luther King's quote about the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. um and so, yeah, we curated this 500 book set, and we're working with Mass Design to build these like actual physical spaces that we could
Mm,
put in dormitories and we could put in housing units. And we also got it set up to partner with the correctional officers and make sure that they had their own library too, because it ain't just me who needs to read, 100 Years of Solitude. It's the correctional officers as well who want to, who should want to, And so we encouraging it on both sides, and we got a bunch of literary ambassadors who we're working to extend the project and that we started here at the Arizona Poetry Center, in the sense that we got these literary ambassadors who are committing to go inside prisons, and we're trying to make it even more capacious. You know, hundreds of folks, like, yeah, show up into the prison in your community, because the job, I think, and the role is to see and to be seen. I was
mm.
just on a call earlier today with some ladies at a prison in Houston, and it was cool. And I know, I mean, you could imagine this, Joe. Like, the warden called you into their office to get on a Zoom call to talk about books. You like, what? You know what I mean? And so it's like building these opportunities that have both the warden doing something that they wouldn't have imagined doing before, and the people inside doing this. And we talk about the Mars Room by Rachel Kushner, and it was a real conversation, a real discussion. So the Million Book Project really is starting with this real, very real notion that freedom begins with a book, and then saying, where do you go from there? And we got podcasts and we got all of these other elements, but the fundamental principle is that freedom begins with a book, and we will put freedom libraries in prisons in every state in this country and Puerto Rico.
That's fantastic. Can you say where we can find the podcast? I listened to one of them, I think maybe on YouTube.
Yeah,
You
so
have,
you can find them on YouTube at the Million Book Projects YouTube channel, but you can also download them on Apple. We love followers. Download them on Apple. Subscribe. I mean, we got podcasts with Miriam Taves, which is awesome.
mm,
Deisha Philia, great. James McBride, it's just like super cool, right? Like a real cool cat. Rion Amaka Scott. Um, Coming up soon is Natalie Diaz and Randall Horton. One of the podcast features me. We'll be interviewing Marlon James, which is going to be really dope next month. We also got Jasmine Ward
wow.
on the come up soon, and Erica Sanchez, whose book "I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican
Yeah,
Daughter"
got it.
is just wonderful, and
Yeah,
we'll have her on the podcast as well. So it'll be really dope. Yeah, I think I'm excited. I'm excited about it. But yeah, I think you could check it out wherever you could get podcasts. Go to Apple, download it, subscribe, write a comment.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's also, and I should just say that the podcast
yeah.
is for people inside too. And the way we framed it is, the first part of the podcast is a 10-minute reading where the writer reads from their work. Because in prison, you don't have poetry readings, you don't
Mm.
have fiction readings, right? And so we set it up with the first 10 minutes, the writer reads from their work to get you in the mood of if you were at like a reading. And then we do a back and forth. And the idea is to collapse some of the distance between the work that we write and the words that we say about the work that we write and about the lives that we live, so that folks inside could be like, oh, yeah, Deisha Philio just read to me for 10 minutes and I was digging that, and then you pick up the book, and it's less of a feel that, like, is this too much for me? What is the
Mhm,
literacy level on this? You
mhm.
you hear Erica Sanchez read from the novel, and you like, oh, she sound like my cousin. She even got using the words that my people use, and so I think it'll create a really rich experience for folks.
That's awesome. Well, Dwayne, it's been amazing hearing your new work, hearing about your projects, also continuing to work with you on the anthology. And I really believe in your work. And I'm just so glad that I'm in the orbit at the Poetry Center to work with not only you, but also with Joe, who's also doing amazing work. But grateful for your time and for your words. And if there's any, I don't think that there's anything else. I just want to just be, end the night with just gratefulness, and just, I'm appreciative of the work that you both do.
It was an honor, man. Thank you, Diana. Thanks, Joe. It was dope.
Thank you.